can say, this is what it means, and they go, oh, yeah. And then I say, use it in a sentence. Oh, have the philosophy or the methodology. Train hard, play easy. That will give you an extra half a band score easily, more than just English. And it's fulfilling, it's rewarding, and I love it. And they get the job.
Hello, Erik. We will start recording. Erik is a CELTA certified teacher from Great Britain originally and living on the Philippines. I wonder, what is your personal opinion about methodology? What kind of methods you use? What kind of approaches you use? Like so many people speak about right now, like communicative or lexical approach. What do you personally use?
Well, my personal method is to have no method. When I began, of course, I wanted to train so that I could do this job professionally, I could do it competently, and that I could be proud in what I was doing. And I attended a course which was several weeks long, which included an enormous amount of homework and preparation. And it was surprisingly hard. I thought it was going to be English, easy because, well, I speak English. I've been to university, I have a degree in history. I thought, how easy is this going to be to teach English? But actually surprisingly difficult. But I'm very happy that I did this. It gave me a grounding. It gave me a foundation on which to build. But it was quite clear that doing the job really well means transcending what I learned on these courses and going beyond it, and reaching out on a more human level to understand really what motivates the student, and to make lessons relevant to the student, and not make the most important thing the book, following the book.
Do you have any favorite course books? Do you use any books?
I do use a course book. I use a very simple course book which contains essays about modern living. And sometimes these essays are really quite simple, but I can make them much more complicated by adding additional information. And I use it as a stepping stone, a springboard into more advanced things. And we go where the lesson goes. We don't stick to the book. And that might mean we only cover a sentence in a lesson. I've had this. Because the student, I've said something that sparked some interest in the student, and they've told me a story. And then maybe I've told them a story all about this one sentence. Whereas that if you just religiously stick to every sentence and you don't go beyond it, you get something that's very boring. Yeah. And this is not how real conversations go. I try to have a real conversation with somebody about something that's relevant to them, to the degree that they forget they're speaking English.
Wow, I think really, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with this, because most often than not, when people are constantly thinking about grammar or about the topic or the vocabulary they have to use, they actually lose fluency.
Yes, exactly. Because they know more than they think they know. It's all there. It's all locked inside their head. Most of my students, they have a very good grammatical foundation in English. What they lack is practice. Yeah. So we have to connect with their brains. They have like a database there, which is difficult to access. So we've got to access it from multiple points. And create these connections and reconnections and get them speaking about subjects that are vital to them, that are important to them. And this is how you do it. If you just teach them new vocabulary, that goes into their database and they can't access it. So yes, it's about new vocabulary. Yes, it's about more advanced grammar, but it's also about using what they know already, because if they don't use it, they forget it.
Well, that's a wonderful thought, because most often, sometimes, people associate a teacher as if by magic he or she will transform all her knowledge or his knowledge from their head, or give them, I don't know, maybe some magical constructions or some cliches that they can use. So
yes, they're always looking for tricks and tips.
Yeah, especially, for instance, for preparation for exams like IELTS or Cambridge exams.
Absolutely.
What is your usual answer to us, the students? Because they come to you and they ask you, especially when they see the reviews on our website, that you helped the person to improve from 6 to 7.5 or from 5 to 6.5. And they think that you have some kind of magical tricks that you shared with them.
Exactly. Well, it's nonsense. And the thing is, the examiners, the people that create these exams, they're not stupid. And what they're testing is they're testing your English. They're not testing your ability to perform some tricks. And you know, to go from a 5 to a 6 or a 6 to a 7 takes, I don't know, some people say it's 100 hours of study. Not 100 hours of lessons, but 100 hours of study. And you get a higher score because you've improved your English, not because you've learned something. It's not going to happen. All the tips in the world might possibly improve your score by half a band score, but it's not significantly going to improve your score until you've significantly improved your English. And this takes a lot of work. And you know, you can buy books and it says things like, you know, vocabulary for IELTS.
Yeah, or grammar for IELTS.
This is nonsense. There is no such language as IELTS.
Exactly.
It's English. They're testing your English. And I mean, there are some tips to give people. There are, which can help them. And
I think that, yeah, I definitely do agree with you here, and we see eye to eye that there are no such a thing like magic tricks that will help everyone. But if they're, for instance, already at their upper intermediate level and they need to prove that their English is upper intermediate, so what they lack is lack of practicing using constructions, or just speaking fluently and be sure of themselves, or practice writing essays.
But yeah, they have to be realistic. They really do. And they have to give up this idea that there's a quick fix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That there's a magic pill they can take. Yeah. And you know this. I mean, I have a trial with a student, and they want to take IELTS, and I say, you know, what score do you need? And they say, I need a 7. And I say, okay, have you taken the exam before? They say, yes. And I say, what score did you get? They say 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, well, when do you want to take this exam? And they say, Friday. The biggest problem is they leave it too late.
Yeah, and they actually don't realize that it is 2 levels, like upper intermediate and advanced. It might take them maybe even 2 years of hard work.
Yes.
But they don't want to hear that.
Yes, it's a huge gap. It's a huge jump from upper intermediate to advanced. It's huge.
Or from intermediate to advanced.
Yeah, or even bigger. It's a vast chasm. There are things to learn. There are. I mean, for example, when reading text, you know, they read the text and then they look at the question and then they read the text again instead of skimming and scanning and looking for keywords. I mean, that is a technique which is very useful. Counting on average how many words you write, you can maximize your time. For example, if you keep reading the text, especially in the beginning, this is a waste of time. You can just look for keywords. Yeah, I mean, for example, you know that the questions get progressively more difficult. And if you're taking a long time over the first questions, the easy questions, you're not going to have any time to look at the more difficult ones. But if you can save time and do the first questions very quickly, then you do make time for more careful deliberation about the more difficult questions. And there are techniques that they can learn to do that. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a helpful tip. But
so but you do not recommend the students to read the whole text. First, like, read the questions, highlight the key.
Because it might say, for example, Americans have the highest rate, or Americans are the most overweight people in the world. Okay, so you've got Americans and you've got overweight as keywords. And you can just put the piece of paper under the text and you can just go down and look for the word America, look for the word overweight and find it. Yeah. And in that sentence will be the answer to the question. You can do that in seconds. Really, you can train a 10-year-old to do this. You just have to look for keywords. Yeah. It might say, are Americans the most overweight in the world? So you just look for Americans, look for overweight, and it says, Americans are the most overweight people in the world. So you say, true. Yeah, takes you no time at all. But if you read the whole text, then they ask the question, and then you start reading again.
Yeah, you lose your precious time.
You're losing your precious time, and you've got no time for the more difficult questions. That's a fair tip. Yeah. And later on, of course, they get a bit clever, these examiners, and they use, you can't look for the keywords, you have to search for synonyms. So instead of searching for overweight, you might find that the text actually says obese, for example. Yeah. And again, you can just search for that. Yeah. Looking out for synonyms. And you can do that quickly. It's only the last questions which are really hard, where there's some real nuance in the text that you can't skim, you can't scan, you have to read very carefully. And then you might find something that seemingly fits, not quite, but seemingly fits, and you jump at it. And you don't read on and find something a bit later that actually is a better fit. So that's another technique you can learn, people. Don't jump at the first thing that looks like an answer.
Yeah, or some students, sometimes they just say that the most difficult thing for them is like when it is not given, not mentioned in the text. They know, for instance, something and they want to put it true, whereas it was not given in the text. So they should choose not given.
Yes, absolutely. But that's quite tricky. That's quite tricky.
Another is about idioms. So many people, because they've looked through criteria, and it is written that for Band 7, you have to use idioms or idiomatic language. And they think that if they learn certain idioms, they will be given Band 7.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yes, they collect idioms and put them in their database. And very often they don't use these idioms appropriately. That's the problem.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
they learn them and use every now and again. And I keep telling them that it will not give them any extra points if they repeat an idiom more than once.
Yeah, I have one student in particular. He's a lovely guy. His English is really great, and he collects idioms, and he loves to use them in our lessons. But he doesn't always use them appropriately. But he has a wonderful collection, and they are useful, no question. But you know, writing in IELTS is a bit different from academic writing in Russia, where you are encouraged to write very long and very complex sentences.
Yeah.
And so what the Russian does is he thinks, okay, you know, I need to write something like Shakespeare, so I need to think in terms of Bulgakov. What would he say?
Tolstoy, long sentences.
I'm going to write a Tolstoy sentence in my brain and then translate it into English. It's a disaster. It doesn't work, and it cannot work because their English is not as good as their Russian. And what we get then is a very long, complicated sentence, which is just a mess. It's just a mess. And I look at it and I just think, what is he talking about? And I say to the student, what are you trying to say? And they tell me. And they tell me, and they're clear. There's clarity in what they say, and I understand it.
So yeah, I think that in Cambridge exam, when they enumerate criteria, there is such a thing like readability. So we don't have it in our country. I mean, when we are writing essays at school or at universities, we are never actually, at least when I started, we were never actually judged whether it is readable. So if you read it aloud, is it easy to understand and comprehend? And if not, you need to change it. Whereas people want to show off that they know inversion, they know ing forms.
Yes. It's a disaster, and I have to keep on reminding them that they are not looking for Shakespeare. And an interesting thing is there was a literary group in England called the Inklings. This was a group of Oxford professors, people like J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and various other writers who were academics. And they discussed one day what they look for in writing. Mm-hmm. And they all agreed that the key thing was clarity. Clarity. The meaning should be clear. That doesn't mean simple. Some things are very complicated.
But the key sentences in every paragraph, they should be very, very clear and probably simple, right? Not complex, not long. That might be. Yeah.
What is the essence of what I'm trying to say? What is the most effective way of saying it? That's what we like in English. Yeah. Well, you definitely have to think in terms of paragraphs first, you know. I mean, you've got an introduction, then you might have idea one, and then another paragraph, idea two, and then a conclusion. Then you're going to think, well, I need four paragraphs, of course. But then you have to think in terms of, you know, ideas and examples, and you want the best idea, the best example, not something subtle, not something nuanced. You want something big, yeah. And then you have to think about, you know, what do I want to say? You have to be very clear in your mind what you want to say. Then you have to think, how am I going to say it? What is the most efficient way of saying it? Yeah. And you've got to look for the very essence. You know, I say to a student, I get an essay from my student, and he says, I want to begin by telling you that I am a doctor, which is 12 words. Only 4 are relevant. I am a doctor. The other 8 words, I want to begin by telling you that, is simply a waste of words. It tells us what we can see. We can see he wants to start by telling us. It's nonsense to use this kind of waffle. We call it waffle, using words that mean nothing.
Well, hello.
Yes, my little babies.
Oh,
And
you have. Hi.
What they could say is, I am a professional doctor, or I'm an experienced doctor, or I'm a qualified doctor, or all 3. They could say, I'm a professional, qualified, and experienced doctor. That adds information, it adds value. Yeah. And then they can go to the next stage, and then they can say, well, I'm a fully qualified and highly experienced professional doctor. And that's a very good sentence. I couldn't write better than this. And they're using words they already know. Yeah?
Yeah, but probably you're speaking about IELTS letters, right? So I think that sometimes they recommend to start with such a word phrase like, I'm writing to complain, or I'm writing to apply.
Yes, that's important. In letter writing, you have to establish why you're writing immediately. And then you've got 5 minutes at the end for checking. Then you simply add these adjectives, and that will give you an extra half a band score easily. Just making your essay more colorful, more vibrant, more interesting, just by adding a few adjectives is going to raise your score dramatically.
They are the top Russian learners' mistakes that they usually make.
Articles.
Yeah, because we don't have them in Russian.
Yes. I mean, if I have to play a Russian in a movie, I just speak normally, but I leave out my articles. I say, I go to doctor, I go to hospital. And people think, he's Russian. I simply point out the mistake, and I would give the link to the student, and they will study this in their own time, and I will expect to see some improvement over the next lessons.
Okay, but I think that it's easier said than done, because for us it's quite complicated. So it doesn't come naturally for us. So yeah, we need to do maybe a lot of exercises, or maybe to see the examples in context. Or it's one thing actually to know the rules. We might know the rules, but when we're speaking, we might forget actually.
Yes, of course it needs practice. I mean, I usually recommend one online resource, and they have, I mean, literally hundreds of exercises. If a student makes quite a lot of mistakes, they're going to get quite a low mark, because it's regarded as being a simple mistake. But they are difficult to learn. They're not easy to learn. You're right. And the thing is, if we look at the definite article, the word the, well, that's the most common word in the English language. So if you don't get that right, you're going to be making lots of mistakes. So if we can put that right, that's going to automatically, massively improve their chances of getting a good score.
And you know, many students, when they come to ours, they ask, like, what is your opinion? How much time do I need to prepare? And will I be ready?
Difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
One thing's for sure, it's more than they
expect.
Occasionally, I've had students that get 1 or 2 nines, but 4 nines is really, really difficult. And it would be difficult for many English people. Yeah, many English people could not get 4 nines. Yeah, and unless you're very educated, you're not going to get 4 nines.
Well, I think that even because of maybe nervousness, or because we need to stick to the time limit for reading, especially, like the texts are quite huge. And we, even if you are a fast reader, if you're an avid reader, I bet that because of, for instance, it's difficult sometimes to concentrate, to keep your attention concentrated all the time. This is an exam without any breaks. So it is taken listening, reading, writing at one sitting. And if a person wants to go to the bathroom, they actually lose their precious time. Nobody gives them any extra minutes.
Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't want to do it. It's tough. It's hard work. It's stressful. No? The philosophy or the methodology: train hard, play easy. And for example, when I have a student that wants to prepare for a job interview, and you know, we look at, for example, 50 common interview questions, and I ask them to write their answers, and then I look at their written answers, and then I try to optimize them. We try to develop optimal answers. But then, you know, then we have to have some role play, and I will start asking them these questions, and then I make it quite easy, but progressively I make it more difficult. And I ask them questions that they haven't anticipated. I make it hard, I make it tough. And by the time they actually have their interview, they find it very easy. And none of their competitors, none of the other applicants are so well prepared. None of them. And they get the job. They nearly always get the job.
Yeah, we have lots of reviews on our website thanking you for fulfilling their dream to immigrate either to Canada or to other countries and getting the job of their dream.
That to me is priceless, and it means so much more to me than getting paid. And many of these students, you know, they're still in touch, and they send me birthday greetings or Christmas cards, or you know, they share their life. If they've had a new baby, they let me know, and it's like family, and it's wonderful, and it means a lot to me. And it's, you know, it's not all about the English. It's helping people to transition to a new life. It's more than just English, and it's fulfilling. It's rewarding, and I love it. And it's the best thing I do. It's the most enjoyable thing I do. Is job interviews. Is second to that. I enjoy IELTS because. You know, because there's a score, you know, if they've had a 5 and then they get a 7, they're just so happy. And it's something very tangible. Whereas just doing general English, it's not tested. The problem, when you have a course book, you expect them to come to you. And I don't think that's the optimal way to teach. It's too generic. It's not specific. You have to understand the motivations of the student. You have to understand what they want to achieve and where they come from and their background. And then you go to meet them. You don't just sit there and expect them to come to you with your book. But the thing about the book I use, that I mentioned earlier, the book which contains a series of essays, is that none of the words, none of the vocabulary is unique to that topic. Even if you're discussing sleep, you might think that there's a lot of vocabulary that's unique to that subject, but all the words, if you check it, are usable in many different contexts. And I always say to people that just because we've looked at a word and I've explained it, I've given them a definition, it doesn't mean that they really know that word. We have to know how to use that word in multiple different contexts. We have to know
collocations,
synonyms, we have to know antonyms, and they have to be able to use
or maybe, derivatives sometimes, like different parts of speech.
Absolutely, and this takes a long time, and you know, who can really learn more than 10 words a day? I can say this is what it means, and they go, oh yeah, and then I say, use it in a sentence. Oh. Let them know that these words, they're not confined to one essay. They are applicable in so many different contexts, and then they begin to realize the value of this word, and then they learn it.
Like, all in all, we came to some kind of conclusion that we see eye to eye on so many things with you, right? That there are no magical tricks that you can but maybe there are some suggestions, or you can actually tell the student personally, for instance, he or she needs to revise articles, or maybe think about less essay planning, like key sentences should be short and precise.
It's sometimes interesting. Students say, I want you to tell me all my mistakes. And I say, are you sure?
Well, that's an interesting topic, actually. What is your view on mistakes correction? Like, do you correct every now and again, or you prefer not to?
No, absolutely. But I try to get it in the back door, not brutally in the front door, because actually people ask.
Mm-hmm. Because they want to have some kind of feedback, they want to improve. Yes. Not all of them, by the way.
No, not all.
Some might feel very discouraged.
Yes, discouraged and intimidated, and most people actually, even if they ask for it, after a while they don't want it. They really don't want it, and it stops the flow of the whole thing. So usually, if they make a mistake, then I'll type the correction. I'll just type it quickly as they're talking. So at the end of the lesson, we've got a hell of a lot of writing in Skype.
So you don't say anything, you don't give comments orally?
Very often I do, yes, of course I do. But I don't do it with every mistake, depending on their level. Because if you do it with every mistake, it just becomes a nightmare. They'll say something, and then I will simply just repeat what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't say, oh, mistake. And yeah, you have to be very gentle and try to get it in the back door. And sometimes I say, there are some repeated mistakes, and this is a resource I want you to have a look at, and look at it in your own time, and then come back to the lesson. We don't want to be doing boring grammatical exercises.
Mm-hmm.
They can do that on their own.
Yeah, and I especially like the idea that you give them the exercises so they can actually practice. It's not just criticizing them, but they can actually learn. Back in my university, at the university, we were never ever praised. So the teacher would always write down the mistakes and then tell in front of the whole class, like, you should have said this, but you told this, or something, you mispronounced the word. But I've read, and a lot of people nowadays say that there are some kind of studies that show that error correction doesn't work with the majority of people because they feel very intimidated, frustrated. very, yeah, discouraged afterwards, after hearing that there are some mistakes. It's better to praise for something which you like, but I think that for exam preparation, it's not as helpful, like personally. I think that if it can help, actually, if it can help them to achieve higher band, why should I keep silence and not correct the mistakes with
absolutely your duty. It's what you're being paid for. For example, somebody says something, and then I will just say it as they should have said. And
maybe in your own sentence even.
Yes, and I try not to upset the flow. They don't want me criticizing them from the moment they start. Yeah, that's horrible. Yes, indeed. There's a certain expectation that people have, and sometimes when you ask people, what do you want to achieve from the lessons, they tell you what they think you expect.
But they actually don't want to hear it.
They actually don't want it.
Yeah.
Yes. So they often say, I want to improve my grammar. Actually, they don't. They want they want to talk. They want to have discussions. They want to use their English. Yeah?
Yeah, but not just boring lessons like the rules and the exercises. It's so
one of the most important things that I learned about teaching, because I've taught many different things, including squash, sport at international level. But one of the most interesting lessons I ever had was from a little old lady. I wanted to stop playing squash, but I needed something to take its place. So I took up fencing. You know fencing?
Wow.
So I went to a class, and I was very put off by the fact that the teacher running the fencing club was a little old lady who had trouble walking. And she just said to me, okay, you want to start fencing, here's a jacket, put the jacket on, here's a glove, put the glove on, this is how you stand, this is the sword, okay, Michael, come here, this is Erik, this is Michael, okay, fence. And we were doing it immediately within 5 minutes of walking into that club. She didn't explain the history of fencing, the science, angle of this. She didn't go into that. She wanted me to do it from the start, so I could have a real taste of it. If you want to speak English, let's speak English. Let's do it. Yeah. I learned a lot.
So true. Like if you have some kind of low marks for speaking, maybe you lack practice of speaking, or sometimes students say, you know what, I want your feedback on speaking and writing, but I will do listening and reading on my own, and they actually don't. And then they're surprised that they have band 6 for writing and speaking and 5 for reading and listening, just because they didn't practice.
Well, what's your experience here? Because I usually find that students do better, Russian students do better on reading and listening than speaking and writing.
I really believe it depends on the student, because unfortunately, sometimes there are students who do not read, like even in Russian, and they don't want, like they always promise that they will do it on their own, and they don't. And then I have to even have reading practice during the lesson, which I personally do not enjoy as much, because for me it seems sometimes, well, like we do not practice speaking so much, because I need to see how much time does it take the person to read. So like we keep in silence. So the person could do that on their own, but no, they really need to. But luckily, some people who are avid readers, like programmers, I had such students that they had 9 in reading, but 7, for instance, in speaking. and 6.5 in writing. So because they do practice reading, that's why they have such amazing results. I would say that not even all English teachers, I mean Russian of Russian origin, can boast of 9, because maybe of lack of attention or sticking to the time limit. For me personally is difficult. I'm a slow reader. I really liked your technique that you recommended today, like using a material object, because it might actually help. So
Yes.
like using a pencil for you to follow, maybe it can increase the speed of reading, because if we don't have anything physical, it might be actually very, very slow.
It's amazing how quick you can do this, and I've actually experimented myself with some test IELTS, where I've just put a piece of paper under the top sentence, and I've just gone down looking for the keywords. Boom, there's the 2 keywords. What's the question? Look at the sentence again. The answer is immediately apparent. It's obvious. It's screamingly obvious, and then boom, you go on to the next one. And you can do 10 like this really, really quickly to do that. If you're panicking, there's no way you're going to do well. You know? Time is hugely important on the reading section. Hugely important. Well, it's important on all of them.
So receive your pieces of advice, personal feedback concerning the essays, personal feedback concerning speaking. This is what is valued actually, which they cannot get in any course book. So the real teacher who is a native speaker and as experienced as you are, with such amazing successful stories with our former IELTS takers.
English when they're doing the looking at the diagrams, for example, which they panic about, but actually it's the easiest thing, because
because we just don't practice it as much.
Yeah, the funny thing is it's absurdly easy, because most of the terminology, most of the vocabulary, it's already given to you. It's already there. Yeah. So all you have to do is to be able to understand what you're looking at. Use the vocabulary.
Choosing the most striking things, like the maximum, or the differences. Or if we need to compare, like the differences, we need to compare the diagrams or pie chart with the line graph.
No commentary as to why this may be so. It's simply not a requirement. Less is more. Usually I have to say to people, no, it's more easy than you think. It really is. They're constantly looking for some Shakespearean way to describe a pie chart. It's simply not required. It's really not required. And less is more. And once they understand this, then they say to me, oh, it's easy. Yeah, it is. It's easier than you think. It's one of the easiest things to teach is the diagram in academic IELTS. And I love it. Yeah. And sometimes I look at these diagrams, and for example, they might be about central heating in a house, for example, and I know nothing about such things. But you know, if you remain calm and you work through the process, just the key thing is don't panic. Students worry that they're going to be asked to write an essay about something they know nothing about. And I say, well, that's fine. There are things that we can do. There are things that we can say, because they're not testing your knowledge. They're testing your English. And you can say, well, I know absolutely nothing about this. And, you know, that's as long as you say that in the grammatically correct. Very funny. This is a guy who was in Kazakhstan, and he was experiencing quite a lot of racism because he wasn't a Kazakh, and he wanted to move abroad with his family. And his level was about 5, and he needed a 7 to go to Australia. And it was an amazing guy with a huge capacity for work. And we prepared something like 20 or 30 essays. And he memorized them all. He absolutely verbatim. I watched him. He wasn't reading. He memorized all of these essays. And one of them was to describe his home. And he was asked, what's the thing in your life? What are you most proud of? And he had no idea. We hadn't prepared such an essay. Of course, there are many hundreds of different essays you might be asked to write.
Yeah, this is one of the things, actually, people nowadays constantly try to watch what are recent IELTS topics, and they think that they need to prepare for these exact questions, whereas I think that it's a bad strategy.
Yeah, you cannot prepare it. But it was funny. He was asked this, and he thought, "Oh dear." And then he thought, "What would Erik do?" And he said, "The thing I'm most proud of is my home." And he described his home. And he got a 7. Don't ask me how. He lives in Australia now with his family. Yeah. Great. It's a success story. Yeah, he went from 5 to 7. Brilliant. How he did it, I don't know.
It's very inspiring.
Yeah. What would Erik do? He thought. You can remember. You can like what we call pick and mix chunks from different essays and join them together. Yeah.
This is probably the best option, but you need to be able to use them correctly, because if the student is intermediate or pre-intermediate, they can sometimes make grammatical mistakes, or they want to cram one essay scheme and use it for all cases, which cannot be done.
Many Russian students, and they give me the answer, which I somehow doubt. You see, in the UK, we're taught, read the question, reread the question, and then read it again. You must answer the question. Now, when I was at school doing history, one of my friends said, I'm going to read about the Great Reform Act of 1832, because I think it's going to be in the exam. And there was nothing in the exam about the Great Reform Act of 1832, but there was a question which was similar, and he simply twisted his answer. And he wrote probably a brilliant essay on the Great Reform Act of 1832, but he got virtually 0 marks. It was a brilliant essay, but he got virtually 0 marks because he hadn't answered the question. And in IELTS, they are very, very, very pernickety about this. Whereas my students say, well, in Russian academic life, people don't really mind. As long as you've written a good essay, they don't really mind. And I wanted to ask you, is this true?
Well, I think that there is something in what they are saying. We are never actually, like when I remember back at school, at university, we don't have such a criteria as task achievement. So if you wrote an essay which has the same keywords that are mentioned in the task, then it's okay. Like if it's grammatically correct and if you have rich vocabulary and Yeah, actually, they are right, because we don't have such a criteria, and we are not trained to pay such detailed attention, concentrated attention to the task itself. Like absolutely every word in IELTS task is important.
And the ability to understand instructions in English is a part of English. So yeah, in the UK, when I did literature at school and we read a book, it was all about what's your view, what did you feel when this. It's not really, elements of it are objective, but a lot of it is subjective.
Oh, I envy English students, because we were taught, like my Russian teacher, like the last one, for instance, one of them just told us, who are you to have your own opinion? We have critics, we have Belinsky, you just need to copy his thoughts from the 19th century and just rephrase them. That's sad but true.
Yes, well.
So, for this reason, a lot of us, actually, I mean, Russians, we are not trained even to express our opinion in the written form, because we actually have never practiced it. We were writing in more general terms, maybe praising the book, the author, the techniques, some kind of stylistic devices, but never actually even, maybe some of us even didn't mention what we really thought about that.
Wow, yeah, it's a huge difference, isn't it?
Yeah, and for this reason, maybe like some IELTS candidates need even to learn about this difference before writing their first essay.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get, when they begin to write, their opening sentences are very often bizarre to English thinking. Yeah, I mean, really bizarre, and you think, what are you talking about? But it's probably what you're saying. Yeah.
Or they are just want to have more words, and they use some kind of suffice it to say, it goes without saying, whereas you can omit those phrases and you can actually get higher score if you don't use them.
Yes, this is a very, very difficult thing for some students to understand, that less is more very often here, and that what you're asking is simpler than they think all they have to do is to write some really long, complex sentences and they've got it cracked, but it simply doesn't work that way. And I used to have a married couple in Kazakhstan, and I used to have an hour lesson with the husband, and immediately afterwards I had the wife, and they were lovely people, and they spent most of their time telling me about their marital difficulties.
And you were like a psychologist,
like a marriage guidance counselor, come English teacher. Yeah, but the funny thing is, his English generally was way better than hers, way better. But I would set him a writing task, and I would start reading his essay, and I would be thinking, what's he talking about? And I would say to him, what do you mean here? And he would tell me, and I would immediately understand from what he said, but I couldn't immediately understand from what he had written, because he wrote these overly long, overly complex, and pretentious, I have to say, pretentious sentences. Whereas his wife would think, oh, my English is really not very good. Let me just write some simple things. And I would say to him, look, your wife is going to get a better score than you. And he would say, oh, no way. No way. My English is better than my wife's. And they had the exam, and she did better. She got a higher score than he did. And he was really unhappy about it. Really unhappy. But I said to him, look, I told you. And then, you know, when I did an exam in English language, my teacher said to me, she said, you waffle. You waffle, you use a lot of words without really any meaning. All you have to do is write as if you're writing to a 10-year-old and you'll get a very good score. And I thought, well, this is nonsense, what's she talking about? But eventually, when I took the exam, I thought, well, okay, I'm going to write as if I'm writing to a 10-year-old, and I'm, you know, and I did, and I got A. I got the highest score. So, you know, there we are. Less is very definitely more. You just have to use the words efficiently and effectively, and don't use words that really don't add anything, because you're not adding value. You're just adding complexity for the sake of adding complexity, but that complexity adds no value. So we regard it as being worthless. Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe like in so, you know, in so many places, on so many websites with those lists of words that can definitely give you band 9, and they cram them or some kind of collocations, and they believe that it might be worthy, whereas it isn't. It is not.
No, and you know, you've got people out there who create a problem in order to sell you the solution. And these people that make these books, you know, grammar for IELTS, vocabulary for IELTS, you know, they're just trying to make some money out of it. They're selling you a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist. And yeah, not good. Not good.
Yeah, you know, like recently I had a student who also was trying to get 7, and her actual level was intermediate. And I told her that it's impossible. Like, you need first to learn some kind of grammar, which is for intermediate, upper intermediate. But she's told, no, I need band 7. She bought a grammar book for advanced, and she was at a loss because there, in an advanced level, they introduce some exceptions, some peculiarities. You know, like when can we use will in conditionals, like in if clause. But if she continues making mistakes with the usual things, that might be even worse to learn this stuff and not to know the basic.
This is the problem, because if their level is this high and they've got a book that's that high, then this level is unsupported by what should be between here and
yeah, it's like building a house. Like you are trying to build a roof and you don't have a foundation yet.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It's doomed to failure, isn't it?
It doesn't impress the examiner if you use an inversion, but you use it incorrectly. Or you start every sentence of yours with inversion, which doesn't sound natural at all.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. You know, there's when you read something that's well written, there's a flow. You're carried along. But when you're reading, and then all of a sudden you have to stop and you think, what? And then you have to reread it. And then you go to the next sentence and you have to reread that. Well, you know, this is not good writing. It's not going to get you anywhere. Yeah. But if you can somehow manage to strangle some sense into the student, and they actually simplify what they're doing, which they mistrust.
Yeah.
Do it, they get a better score. Woohoo! It's like writing a letter when the task is you lost your luggage on a bus from an airport, yeah, and they write to the bus company and say, having returned from my successful business trip.
Yeah. As if we're reading I don't know, a short story by Dickens or something like that.
Yes, yes. And then there's one sentence which is a description of the bag, which can, you know,
Which is up to the topic, right?
which is really what you want. You want to be describing your luggage and the contents. But he says, at the end, he said it's a black bag or a black suitcase. But he's told you about his hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, these are great. I love these, and they're often, they put so much effort into it, and it's a wonderful story, but it's not a great letter for an exam. So that's difficult. You have to be very tactful and say, this is great, I love this. This is about your hotel and the swimming pool and the fact that you use the gym. It's all wonderful stuff. I love it, but
we should delete it because it's not up to the
you
top.
haven't described your luggage. Yeah, it's great. I love it.